I was staring at the certified letter when my doorbell rang for the third time that morning, and I knew exactly who it was before I even opened the door. "Mr. Keller, we need to discuss your solar thermal system immediately." Patricia Hendricks stood on my front porch in her typical uniform. A cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, oversized sunglasses pushed up into her perfectly highlighted blonde hair, and a leather portfolio clutched against her chest like a shield. She was the president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable ever since I moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago. "Patricia, I already told you last week that my system is completely within code and approved by the city." I held up the letter she had just sent me. "This is the 4th notice I have received about this." "The HOA board has voted unanimously," she said, her voice taking on that shrill quality that made my teeth hurt. "Your solar thermal heating system is an eyesore and violates our community aesthetic standards." Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that all exterior modifications must be approved by the board before installation. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that losing my temper would not help the situation. "Patricia, I submitted the plans 3 months before installation. I never heard back from the board, and according to Arizona state law, if the HOA does not respond within 60 days, the request is automatically approved. I followed every rule." Her face flushed red. "We never received any such plans. I have certified mail receipts that say otherwise." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I had taken of the receipts. "Signed for by Sharon Mitchell at the HOA office on March 15th. Would you like me to send these to my attorney?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "The board's decision is final. You have 30 days to remove that hideous contraption from your roof or face daily fines of $500. "That system heats my entire house and provides hot water," I said, feeling my calm facade starting to crack. "It is saving me over $300 a month on utility bills. And it is not hideous. It is 4 flat panels that are barely visible from the street." "It sets a precedent," Patricia snapped. "If we allow you to keep your panels, then everyone will want to install them." "This is a luxury community, Mr. Keller. We have standards to maintain." "Standards?" I could not keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Patricia, half the houses in this neighborhood have satellite dishes the size of compact cars. The Johnsons 3 doors down have a fountain in their front yard that lights up like a Vegas casino at night. But my solar thermal system that you can barely see is somehow destroying property values. Those are different situations entirely." She pulled a document from her portfolio and thrust it at me. "This is your official violation notice. 30 days, Mr. Keller. I suggest you hire a contractor soon because those fines will add up quickly." She turned on her designer heels and marched back to her white Mercedes SUV, leaving me standing in my doorway holding 2 pieces of paper that essentially threatened to bankrupt me if I did not tear out a perfectly legal, environmentally friendly heating system that I had spent $15,000 installing. I called my attorney that afternoon. "Trevor, it is Tom Keller," I said when he picked up. "I need your help with an HOA issue." Trevor Morrison had been my friend since college and had recently started his own practice specializing in property law. "Let me guess, Patricia Hendricks is after you again. How did you know?" "Because you are the 3rd person from Meadowbrook Hills who has called me this month," Trevor said. "She has been on a rampage lately. What is it this time?" I explained the situation with the solar thermal system, the approved plans, and the threat of daily fines. Trevor listened quietly, and I could hear him typing notes on his computer. "Okay, "This is actually pretty straightforward," he said. "Arizona has strong solar rights laws. Under State Statute 44-1761, HOAs cannot prohibit solar energy devices, and they cannot require removal of systems that were legally installed. The fact that you submitted plans and they failed to respond within the required time frame makes their case even weaker. So what do I do? Send them a formal response citing the state statute and make it clear you will not be removing the system. If they actually try to fine you, we will file for an injunction and probably countersue for harassment." Most HOAs back down once they realize they are legally in the wrong and facing attorney fees. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. "Thanks, Trevor. I will draft something tonight and send it to you for review." "One more thing," Trevor added. "Document everything. Every interaction with Patricia or the board. Save every email. Take photos of everything. If this does go to court, we want a complete record." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table composing a carefully worded letter to the HOA board. Outside my window, I could see the 4 black panels on my roof, sleek and efficient, quietly heating water that circulated through radiant floor heating throughout my house. The system was brilliant in its simplicity. Solar thermal collectors heated a glycol solution that transferred heat to a large insulated storage tank in my garage. From there, the heated water circulated through pipes embedded in my concrete floors, keeping my entire house at a comfortable temperature without a traditional furnace or air conditioning for most of the year. In the Arizona desert, where summer temperatures routinely hit 115 degrees and winter nights could drop below freezing, having an efficient heating and cooling system was not just about saving money. It was about sustainability and reducing my carbon footprint. I had done months of research before installing the system, working with a reputable contractor and ensuring everything met or exceeded local building codes. 3 days later, I sent my response to the HOA via certified mail and email. I cited the relevant Arizona statutes, included copies of my original plan submission with the signed receipt, and made it abundantly clear that I would not be removing my solar thermal system. Patricia's response arrived within 24 hours. "Your defiance of the HOA board's authority has been noted," the email read. "As of November 1st, you will be assessed a daily fine of $500 for maintaining an unapproved exterior modification. Additionally, the board has voted to revoke your access to community amenities including the fitness center, pool, and clubhouse until this matter is resolved." I forwarded the email to Trevor. "She is bluffing," he said when he called me back. "They cannot legally fine you for a system that is protected under state law, and revoking amenity access. That is a breach of your HOA agreement since you are paying dues specifically for those amenities. Let me draft a response that will make it very clear they are opening themselves up to serious legal liability." November 1st came and went. True to her word, Patricia sent me a fine notice for $500. She also had the security codes changed on the fitness center and pool area, effectively locking me out of facilities I was paying monthly dues to access. Trevor filed for an emergency injunction the next day. The hearing was scheduled for November 10th in Maricopa County Superior Court. I took the day off work and met Trevor at the courthouse early that morning. Patricia arrived with the entire HOA board and an attorney who looked like he had just graduated from law school and was not particularly happy to be there. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Margaret Chen, listened to both sides, present their arguments. Patricia's attorney tried to claim that the HOA had absolute authority over aesthetic decisions within the community, while Trevor methodically dismantled that argument with citations to Arizona solar rights laws and the HOA's own failure to follow proper procedures. "Your Honor," Trevor said, "the HOA had 60 days to respond to my client's properly submitted plans. They failed to do so. Under both their own bylaws and state law, that constitutes approval. Furthermore, Arizona Statute 44-1761 explicitly protects the right of homeowners to install solar energy devices. The HOA's attempt to force removal of this system is not only legally baseless, but also potentially discriminatory." Judge Chen looked at Patricia and her attorney. "Do you have any documentation showing that Mr. Keller's plans were actually rejected within the required time frame?" Patricia's attorney shuffled through his papers. "Your Honor, the HOA maintains that they never received the original submission. But they signed for certified mail on March 15th, Trevor interjected, holding up the receipt. "That is documented proof of delivery." "Even if we accept that the plans were received," the HOA attorney said, "the board maintains that the aesthetic impact was not properly disclosed and that the installation does not meet community standards." Judge Chen removed her glasses and fixed both attorneys with a stern look. "I am going to make this very simple. Arizona law protects homeowners' rights to install solar energy systems. HOAs cannot prohibit such installations, and they certainly cannot fine homeowners for legally installed systems. The injunction is granted. The HOA will immediately cease all fines and restore Mr. Keller's access to community amenities. If the HOA wishes to pursue this matter further, they may do so, but I am warning you now that you are fighting an uphill battle against state law." She banged her gavel, and just like that, it was over. Patricia's face had gone from red to white during the judge's ruling, and she refused to make eye contact as we left the courtroom. "That went well," Trevor said as we walked to the parking lot. "You should not have any more trouble from them." I wanted to believe him, but I knew Patricia well enough by now to know she did not take losing gracefully. For 2 weeks, everything was quiet. I got my amenity access restored, the fines were removed from my account, and Patricia seemed to be avoiding me entirely. I started to think that maybe the court ruling had actually put an end to the whole mess. Then winter hit Scottsdale hard. It started on November 23rd, 3 days before Thanksgiving. A cold front moved down from Canada, bringing temperatures that plummeted into the 20s at night. For Arizona, this was unusual but not unheard of. Most homes in the area had heating systems that could handle a few cold nights without any issues, except the homes in Meadowbrook Hills were different. Our neighborhood had been built 5 years ago by a developer who had cut corners wherever possible while maintaining the appearance of luxury. Instead of individual heating systems for each house, the developer had installed a centralized geothermal system that served the entire community. Wells had been drilled deep into the ground, and a network of pipes circulated fluid through the earth to provide heating and cooling to all 68 homes in the development. It was supposed to be energy efficient and cost-effective, with maintenance costs shared across all homeowners through our HOA dues. The problem was that the system had never been properly maintained. I started hearing about it on the morning of November 24th. My neighbor, Frank Rodriguez, knocked on my door looking frantic. "Tom, do you have heat?" he asked. "Yeah, my system is working fine." "Why?" "The community geothermal system is down. Our house is freezing. Sandra called the HOA emergency line an hour ago, but nobody has called back." I invited Frank inside, and we stood in my warm kitchen while he called his wife to check on her and their 2 young kids. The contrast was immediately obvious. My radiant floor heating, powered by my solar thermal system with a backup electric heater, was keeping my house at a comfortable 72 degrees. Frank's house, dependent on the community system, was apparently down to 58 degrees and dropping. "Have you talked to anyone else?" I asked. "I ran into Bill Harrison at the mailbox. His heat is out too. I think the whole system is down." My phone started ringing. It was my neighbor on the other side, Deanne Chen. "Tom, please tell me you are having heating problems too." "No, mine is working. Is yours out?" "We have had no heat since last night. I have 3 kids, Tom. The youngest is only 18 months old. What are we supposed to do?" I told her to bring the kids over to my house to warm up while they figured out the situation. Within an hour, I had 5 families crowded into my living room, all trying to reach the HOA and figure out what was happening with the heating system. Patricia finally answered her phone at 11 in the morning. "Yes, we are aware of the issue," she said, her voice tight with stress. "We have contacted the maintenance company and they are working on it." "When will it be fixed?" Frank asked. He had her on speakerphone so everyone could hear. "They said it could take 24 to 48 hours. 48 hours. Deanne's voice rose to a near shout. "Patricia, it is going to be in the low 20s tonight. We have children. We cannot stay in houses with no heat for 2 days. I suggest you use space heaters or stay with family," Patricia said coolly. "The HOA is doing everything we can." "What about hotels?" someone asked. "Will the HOA cover the cost?" "That is not in our budget. This is an unexpected maintenance issue." "We pay $700 a month in HOA dues," Frank said. "That is supposed to cover maintenance on the shared systems." "And it does, but we cannot control when things break down." "I have to go. We have multiple calls coming in." She hung up, leaving everyone staring at the phone in disbelief. "This is unbelievable," Bill Harrison said. He was a retired firefighter in his 60s who had moved to Arizona for the warm weather. "How can they not have a backup plan for something like this?" I made coffee and let everyone use my house as a warming station while they made arrangements. Some decided to buy space heaters, others called family or looked at hotel rooms. The Chen family ended up staying with Diane's parents across town. That night, the temperature dropped to 23 degrees. I lay in bed listening to the quiet hum of my system maintaining perfect comfort throughout my house, and I could not help but think about all my neighbors shivering in their expensive homes because the HOA had failed to maintain a critical system. The next morning was Thanksgiving. My phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. "Tom, it is Frank. Our pipes froze overnight. We have water damage in the kitchen and one of the bathrooms. This is a disaster." Over the next few hours, I learned that at least 12 homes had suffered frozen pipes. The temperature inside the houses had dropped low enough that pipes in exterior walls had frozen and burst, causing flooding and water damage. Families who had tried to tough it out with space heaters found that the portable units could not keep up with the cold, especially in the large, poorly insulated homes that characterized Meadowbrook Hills. I spent my Thanksgiving cooking a turkey and hosting 8 families who had nowhere else to go. My house was not big enough for everyone to sit at the table, so we set up chairs throughout the living room and kitchen, and people ate in shifts. The kids thought it was an adventure, but the adults were stressed and angry. "We need to do something about this," Frank said as we stood in my kitchen carving turkey. "The HOA has been negligent. They have known about issues with the geothermal system for months." "How do you know that?" I asked. "Because I serve on the landscape committee. I sit in on some of the board meetings. Patricia and the treasurer, Deborah Walsh, have been fighting about maintenance costs all year. Deborah wanted to have the geothermal system inspected and serviced, but Patricia kept saying it was too expensive and could wait. Do you have any documentation of that? Meeting minutes. They are supposed to be distributed to all homeowners, but Patricia has been dragging her feet on making them available. I thought about this while I finished carving. Frank, I think we need to call an emergency meeting of the homeowners association, not the board but the actual homeowners. We have the right to do that under the bylaws. How do you know? Because I read the entire bylaws document when Patricia started harassing me about my solar panels. Any homeowner can call for a special meeting if they get signatures from 25% of the homes. Frank grinned. That is only 17 signatures. I bet we could get that in an hour right now. We spent the afternoon going door to door through the freezing neighborhood, explaining the situation to anyone who would listen. Some people were reluctant to get involved, worried about retaliation from the board. But most were angry enough about frozen houses and burst pipes that they eagerly signed our petition. By 4 in the afternoon, we had signatures from 23 homeowners. We drafted a formal notice calling for a special meeting on November 27th, 2 days away, to discuss the heating system failure and potential votes of no confidence in the current board. I delivered the notice to Patricia's house personally. She answered the door in a bathrobe, looking exhausted. "What is this?" she asked, taking the papers. "Notice of a special homeowners meeting. It is all legal and by the book. We will be meeting at the community clubhouse at 7 on the 27th. Her eyes scanned the document and I watched her face go through several shades of emotion. "You cannot do this." "Actually, we can. It is in the bylaws. This is because you are angry about the solar panel issue. You are trying to get revenge. Patricia, 17 homes have frozen pipes. People have thousands of dollars in water damage. Kids have been sleeping in houses that are 40 degrees inside. This is not about revenge. This is about accountability." She tried to slam the door, but I had already turned and was walking back to my truck. The heating system came back online on November 26th, 3 days after it had failed. The maintenance company's report, which someone leaked to the neighborhood email chain, revealed that the system had failed due to a combination of poor maintenance, corroded components, and a pump that had simply given out after years of neglect. The repairs cost $43,000, which completely wiped out the HOA's reserve fund. The special meeting on November 27th was packed. All 68 homes were represented, either in person or by proxy. Patricia and the 4 other board members sat at the front table looking like they were facing a firing squad. Frank stood up to speak first. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I know we all have a lot to talk about, but I want to start by establishing some facts. The heating system that serves our community failed on November 23rd. It remained offline for 3 days, during some of the coldest weather Scottsdale has seen in years. As a result, 17 homes suffered frozen pipes and water damage. The repair cost for the system was $43,000, and homeowners are facing individual repair costs ranging from $3,000 to $20,000 for water damage. A woman I did not recognize stood up. "I want to know why the system was not properly maintained. We pay $700 a month in dues. Where is that money going?" Deborah Walsh, the treasurer, looked at Patricia and then stood up. "I have been trying to get proper maintenance scheduled on the geothermal system since March. The manufacturer recommended annual inspections and servicing. But the board, specifically Patricia as president, voted to defer maintenance to save money for other projects." "What other projects?" someone shouted. The board has been discussing installing new entry monuments and upgrading the clubhouse, Deborah said quietly. The room erupted in angry voices. People were standing up, shouting questions and accusations. Patricia tried to call for order, but nobody was listening to her anymore. I stood up and raised my voice. Everyone, please, let us handle this properly. I move that we hold a vote of no confidence in the current board and hold immediate elections for new board members. Seconded, Frank called out. Patricia looked panicked. You cannot just remove the entire board. That is not how this works. Actually, it is exactly how it works, Trevor Morrison said. I had invited him to attend as a legal observer, and he stood up holding a copy of the HOA bylaws. Section 18 allows for the removal of board members by a 2/3 vote of homeowners present at a special meeting. The same section allows for immediate replacement elections. The vote was not even close. All 5 board members were removed by a show of hands that was overwhelmingly in favor. We then held nominations and quick elections for a new board. Frank was elected president. Deborah was kept on as treasurer since she had actually been trying to do the right thing, and 3 other homeowners I did not know well were elected to fill out the board. Patricia left the meeting without saying a word, her face ashen. The next day, the real problem started to emerge. The new board held its first meeting and went through the HOA's financial records. What they found was shocking. Frank called me that evening. Tom, you need to hear this. We went through 3 years of financial records today. Patricia has been mismanaging money on a scale that is hard to believe. How bad are we talking? She spent $68,000 of reserve funds on landscaping improvements without getting homeowner approval. She hired her brother-in-law's company to repaint the clubhouse and paid $50,000 for work that should have cost $20,000. And she has been taking a salary as HOA president. Wait, what? Board members are volunteers. That is standard for HOAs. Exactly. But Patricia created a consulting fee for herself. She has been paying herself $2,000 a month for the last 2 years as a community management consultant. I felt sick. That is embezzlement. That is what our new attorney said. We have an emergency board meeting scheduled for tomorrow night, and we are going to have to decide how to handle this. I attended the meeting as an observer. The 5 new board members reviewed the evidence that had been gathered: bank statements, invoices, canceled checks, and emails. The pattern was clear. Patricia had been systematically diverting HOA funds for personal gain and vanity projects while deferring critical maintenance on the systems that actually mattered. We need to file a police report, Deborah said. This is criminal fraud. We are talking about over $100,000 that has been stolen or misused. What about civil action? Someone asked. Can we sue to recover the money? We can do both, the board's attorney said. File a criminal complaint and pursue civil litigation. Given the amount of money involved and the clear evidence of intent to defraud, this is absolutely a case for law enforcement. The vote was unanimous. Frank called the Scottsdale Police Department that night and filed a formal complaint. Detective Sarah Martinez was assigned to the case. She was a financial crimes investigator who specialized in fraud and embezzlement. I met her 3 days later when she came to interview homeowners about their experiences with the HOA board. Mr. Keller, I understand you had some conflicts with Miss Hendricks prior to this investigation, she said as we sat in my living room. She tried to force me to remove my solar thermal heating system. She threatened daily fines and actually did fine me $500 before a judge issued an injunction against the HOA. And this system, Detective Martinez looked up at my ceiling, is that what is keeping your house warm right now? Yes. It is a solar thermal system that heats water and circulates it through radiant floor heating. I also have backup electric heating for cloudy days or extreme cold. So when the community system failed, you were not affected. Right. I was actually able to host families from the neighborhood who had no heat. 8 families spent Thanksgiving at my house. Detective Martinez made notes in her tablet. That is interesting. So, Miss Hendricks tried to force you to remove the very system that ended up saving you from the heating crisis she helped create through negligence. I had not thought about it that way, but yes, I suppose that is accurate. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Martinez interviewed dozens of homeowners and reviewed thousands of pages of financial records. The case she built was damning. Patricia had not just been negligent. She had been actively stealing from the HOA for over 2 years, using the money for personal expenses, unnecessary projects that benefited her friends and family, and luxuries for herself. The arrest happened on December 15th. I was not there to see it, but Frank called me with the news. They just took Patricia away in handcuffs. She is being charged with embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The DA says she could be looking at 5 to 10 years in prison if convicted. How is she reacting? According to Deborah, who watched the whole thing, Patricia was screaming about how we all conspired against her and how her attorney is going to destroy us. But she looked terrified, Tom. Reality is finally hitting her. The story made the local news that evening. I watched the segment showing Patricia being led out of her house by police, her hands cuffed behind her back, her perfect blonde hair disheveled for probably the first time in years. The news anchor described her as the president of a homeowners association who had allegedly embezzled over $150,000 from her neighbors. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, insurance claims, and repairs. The HOA's insurance covered some of the stolen funds, but there was still a significant shortfall. The new board worked with an emergency management company to get all the homes with water damage repaired and to establish a proper maintenance schedule for the geothermal system. In January, the board made a decision that felt like vindication. Frank called me to his house for a meeting with the entire board. Tom, we have been reviewing the situation with the community heating system, he said. The geothermal setup was supposed to be efficient and cost-effective, but the reality is that it is expensive to maintain, prone to failure, and creates a single point of failure for the entire community. What are you proposing? I asked. We want to give homeowners the option to disconnect from the central system and install their own heating and cooling. The geothermal system will remain operational for anyone who wants to keep using it, but we will no longer prohibit individual systems. Deborah added, and we want to actively encourage solar thermal systems like yours. We have done the math, and if even half the homes installed solar thermal heating, it would reduce the load on the community system and lower everyone's utility costs. More importantly, Frank said, we want to hire you as a consultant to help homeowners understand their options and find reputable contractors. We will pay you a fair rate, and it will help the community avoid another disaster like this. I was stunned. Are you serious? Completely. You were right all along, Tom. Your system works, it is efficient, and it is reliable. Patricia tried to punish you for being ahead of the curve. We want to make sure everyone has access to the same technology. Over the next 3 months, I worked with 19 families to install solar thermal heating systems. Some opted for full systems like mine. Others went with hybrid setups that supplemented the geothermal system. The change in the neighborhood was remarkable. People felt empowered to make their own decisions about their homes, and the sense of community actually improved. Patricia's trial began in March. Trevor encouraged me to attend, so I sat in the courtroom and watched as the prosecution laid out their case. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, emails, invoices, testimony from contractors who had been overcharged, testimony from Patricia's brother-in-law who admitted under oath that he had been paid inflated prices and had kicked back money to Patricia. The most damning evidence came from Patricia's own records. She had been sloppy, keeping receipts for personal purchases that she had made with HOA funds. Designer handbags, jewelry, expensive dinners, even a trip to Hawaii that she had claimed was for a community management conference that did not actually exist. Her attorney tried to argue that Patricia had been overwhelmed by the responsibilities of managing the HOA and had made mistakes rather than intentional thefts. The jury did not buy it. On March 27th, Patricia Hendricks was found guilty on 12 counts of embezzlement, 6 counts of fraud, and 3 counts of breach of fiduciary duty. The judge sentenced her to 6 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution of $162,000 to the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. I sat in the courtroom as the sentence was read and watched Patricia break down crying. Part of me felt sorry for her. She had destroyed her life over greed and an obsession with control. But another part of me remembered all the families with frozen houses, all the children who had been cold and scared, all the thousands of dollars in damage that could have been prevented if she had just done her job properly. After the trial, I stood outside the courthouse with Frank and Deborah. "Well, that is over," Frank said. "Now we can actually focus on making Meadowbrook Hills a good place to live." "We got lucky," Deborah added. "If Tom's system had not worked, if he had not been able to help people during the crisis, this could have been so much worse." "It was not luck," I said. "It was preparation. I researched, I followed the rules, and I installed a system that made sense for my needs." Patricia tried to stop me because she could not control it. That was always what this was about. Control. The next week, the HOA board held a community meeting to discuss the future. Over 50 homeowners attended, and the mood was optimistic for the first time since I had moved in. Frank stood at the front of the room. "I want to start by thanking everyone for their patience during these difficult months. We have been through a lot as a community, but I think we have learned some important lessons." He outlined the new policies the board had implemented. Transparent financial reporting with monthly summaries sent to all homeowners. Mandatory competitive bidding for any project over $5,000. Term limits for board members, and quarterly town halls where homeowners could ask questions and voice concerns. "We also want to formally apologize to Tom Keller," Frank said, gesturing to where I sat in the back. "Tom did everything right. He researched, he followed the rules, he submitted proper plans, and he installed a system that is legal under Arizona law. The previous board harassed him, threatened him, and fined him illegally. That was wrong, and it will never happen again under our leadership." People turned to look at me, and several started clapping. I felt my face flush with embarrassment, but I appreciated the gesture. After the meeting, several homeowners came up to thank me personally. Bill Harrison shook my hand and said, "You saved my wife and me that weekend. We would have been in the hospital with hypothermia if you had not let us stay at your house." Deanne Chen hugged me and said, "My kids still talk about the Thanksgiving at Mr. Tom's house. They think you are a hero." I did not feel like a hero. I felt like someone who had done what made sense and had gotten lucky that it worked out, but I accepted their thanks and tried to be gracious. In April, the HOA board presented me with a plaque at the quarterly meeting. It read, "Presented to Tom Keller in recognition of his dedication to sustainable living and his service to the Meadowbrook Hills community, during the heating crisis of 2025. I hung it on my wall next to my engineering degree and the photo of my late wife that I kept to remind me why I had moved to Arizona in the first place. She had always wanted to live somewhere warm and sunny. She had passed away from cancer 2 years ago, and moving to Scottsdale had been my way of honoring her memory and trying to start fresh. Looking at her photo, I thought about how she would have handled the situation with Patricia. She probably would have organized the resistance much sooner, rallied the neighbors, and turned the whole thing into a cause. She had been a fighter, my Sarah. Cancer had taken her body, but it had never broken her spirit. I think you would have liked how this turned out, I said to her photo. The good guys won. Justice prevailed, and maybe we made the neighborhood a little bit better. By summer, 19 homes in Meadowbrook Hills had solar thermal systems installed and operating. The community geothermal system was still functioning for the homes that wanted to use it, but the load had been reduced enough that maintenance costs were way down. The HOA was actually running a budget surplus for the first time in years. Frank and I became close friends. We had barbecues, watched football games together, and he helped me install raised garden beds in my backyard. The sense of community that had been missing when I first moved in had finally developed, forged through shared crisis and the realization that we were all in this together. One evening in June, as we sat on my back patio watching the sun set over the McDowell Mountains, Frank raised his beer bottle in a toast. To Tom Keller, the man who was right all along. I was not right about everything, I said. I just got lucky that my system worked when everyone else's failed. That was not luck, and you know it. You did your homework. You invested in the right technology. You stood up to a bully who tried to abuse her power. And when the crisis came, you opened your home to help people. That is not luck, Tom. That is character. I clinked my bottle against his and took a long drink. The Arizona evening was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of creosote and sage from the desert beyond the development. My house was comfortable, my system was running perfectly, and my neighbors were safe and happy. It had been a hell of a journey, from that first certified letter threatening fines to watching Patricia led away in handcuffs. From hosting desperate families on Thanksgiving to helping them install their own sustainable heating systems. The whole experience had taught me things about community, about standing up for what was right, and about how quickly an abuse of power could spiral into genuine criminality. Patricia was serving her sentence at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville, about 30 miles from Scottsdale. I had heard through the neighborhood gossip network that she was working in the prison laundry and had apparently become very quiet and withdrawn. Her husband had divorced her, and her grown children had apparently cut off contact. She had lost everything because she could not let go of control and could not resist the temptation to steal from people who had trusted her. I tried not to think about her too much. What she had done was wrong, and she was paying the price for it. But I also recognized that she was a human being who had made terrible choices and would have to live with the consequences for the rest of her life. The HOA board continued to function smoothly under Frank's leadership. They were transparent, responsive, and focused on actually maintaining the community rather than building monuments to their own authority. The monthly financial reports showed exactly where every dollar went, and the quarterly town halls gave everyone a voice in decision-making. In August, the board proposed a new policy that would have made me laugh if it had not been so appropriate. They wanted to amend the HOA bylaws to explicitly protect homeowners' rights to install solar energy systems, going beyond even what Arizona state law required. "We want to make sure this never happens again," Frank explained at the town hall where the amendment was discussed. No future board should be able to harass homeowners for making sustainable choices. This policy will protect everyone's rights and encourage the kind of innovation that actually benefits the community. The amendment passed with only 2 votes against it. Meadowbrook Hills officially became one of the most solar-friendly HOA communities in Arizona. My business as a consultant continued to grow. Word spread beyond Meadowbrook Hills, and I started getting calls from homeowners in other developments who wanted to install solar thermal systems and needed advice on dealing with their HOAs. I worked with Trevor to develop a guide for navigating HOA regulations and Arizona solar rights laws, and we made it available for free online. By the end of the year, I had helped over 60 families install solar thermal systems across the Phoenix metro area. Some were in HOA communities, others were in areas without HOA restrictions, but all of them shared a common goal: reducing their environmental impact and taking control of their own energy use. On New Year's Eve, the Meadowbrook Hills community held a party at the clubhouse. It was the first time since the heating crisis that everyone felt comfortable gathering together and celebrating. The new board had used some of the budget surplus to upgrade the clubhouse kitchen and install a proper sound system, and the party was surprisingly well attended. I stood near the bar, nursing a beer and watching my neighbors dance and laugh. Diane Chen's kids were running around with sparklers under careful adult supervision. Frank and his wife Sandra were slow dancing near the DJ booth. Bill Harrison was telling stories to a group of younger homeowners who had moved in recently and had missed all the drama. Deborah Walsh came up beside me. "Quite a difference from last year, huh?" "I was not here last year. What was it like?" Patricia hosted a formal dinner that cost the HOA $15,000. Everyone had to dress up, the food was pretentious, and nobody had any fun. "This," she gestured around the room, "is so much better." "Because it is real," I said. "People actually want to be here." "You know, Tom, I have been meaning to thank you. If you had not pushed back against Patricia, if you had just given in and removed your solar panels, none of this would have happened. She would still be stealing money, the heating system would still be neglected, and this community would still be a miserable place to live. I did not do it to be a hero. I just did not want to waste $15,000 on a perfectly good system." "Maybe that is what heroes are," Deborah said. "People who stand up for what is right even when it is hard, and then insist they were just doing the obvious thing." At midnight, we all counted down together and cheered as the clock struck 12. Fireworks exploded over the desert beyond our neighborhood, and someone started singing Auld Lang Syne. I joined in, surrounded by people who had become genuine friends, in a community that had transformed from a nightmare into something approaching ideal. As I drove home that night, I looked at my house with fresh eyes. The solar panels on the roof were barely visible in the darkness, but I knew they were there, silently collecting moonlight and waiting for the sun to rise again. The system I had fought so hard to keep had become a symbol of everything this community had learned over the past year. Inside, my house was warm and comfortable, exactly 72 degrees, thanks to the radiant floor heating that had saved so many of my neighbors during the coldest night of winter. I made a cup of tea and sat in my living room, looking at the plaque the HOA had given me and thinking about everything that had happened. Year ago, I had been a widower trying to start over in a new city, getting harassed by an HOA president who saw me as a threat to her authority. Now I had friends, a thriving side business, and the satisfaction of knowing that I had helped make a real difference in my community. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Thanks for everything, brother. Here is to a better year ahead. I texted back a thumbs up and a beer emoji, then set my phone aside and just enjoyed the quiet of my warm, comfortable home. Outside, the temperature was dropping into the 30s, but inside I was perfectly comfortable, protected by a system that I had chosen, installed, and defended against all the petty tyranny that Patricia Hendricks could muster. The irony was not lost on me. Patricia had demanded I remove my system, threatened me with fines, dragged me to court, and made my life miserable for months. And then, when her negligence caused the community heating system to fail completely, my system was the only thing that worked. I had become an accidental hero simply by refusing to give in to an unjust demand. In the morning, I woke to bright Arizona sunshine streaming through my windows. The solar thermal panels on my roof were already at work, heating water and circulating warmth throughout my house. I made breakfast and checked my email, finding 3 new inquiries from homeowners who wanted to install similar systems. I replied to each one with the same advice I always gave. Do your research, follow the rules, document everything, and do not let anyone bully you out of making smart choices for your home and your future. Most HOAs were reasonable if you approached them professionally and knew your rights. And for the ones that were not, there were laws to protect homeowners from abuse of power. The story of what happened in Meadowbrook Hills spread throughout the Phoenix area. Local news did follow-up stories on Patricia's conviction and sentencing. A regional magazine did a feature on the community's transformation and the rise of solar thermal heating in HOA communities. I was interviewed for several articles and podcasts, always emphasizing the same points. Know your rights, stand up for yourself, and invest in technology that makes sense regardless of what your neighbors think. Patricia became something of a cautionary tale in HOA management circles. At a conference I attended in the spring, several speakers referenced the Meadowbrook Hills case as an example of how quickly poor governance and financial mismanagement could spiral into criminal behavior. One speaker even quoted from the judge's sentencing statement. HOA board members are entrusted with their neighbors' money and well-being. When that trust is violated for personal gain, it strikes at the heart of community living and must be punished accordingly. Frank finished out his term as HOA president and then chose not to run for re-election. He had accomplished what he set out to do: restore transparency and trust to the organization. The new president was a woman named Rachel Torres, a retired accountant who had moved to Meadowbrook Hills just before the heating crisis. She had seen everything that happened and was determined to maintain the reforms Frank had implemented. Under Rachel's leadership, the HOA created a community solar garden that homeowners could buy into if they did not want to install their own systems. The garden was built on a vacant lot at the edge of the development, and the electricity it generated was distributed to participating homes through the existing grid. It was another way of giving homeowners options and reducing the community's overall carbon footprint. I visited Patricia's husband, Greg, one afternoon in May. He had stayed in their house after the divorce, trying to rebuild his life. We sat on his back patio, and he told me about the experience of watching his wife's downfall. "I did not know," he said. "I swear I did not know she was stealing money. I knew she was obsessed with the HOA, that she spent all her time on board business, but I thought she was just dedicated." "I believe you," I said. "Patricia was good at hiding what she was doing. She called me from prison last month. First time she has called since the conviction. She wanted to apologize, to explain. She said she started with just small things, little expenses that she justified to herself. But then it became easier, and the amounts got bigger, and she could not stop." "What did you say?" I told her I forgave her, but I could not be part of her life anymore. She made her choices, and now she has to live with them. I have to move on. We sat in silence for a while, watching the desert birds flit through the landscaping. "Tom, I want you to know that I am glad you did not back down," Greg finally said. "If you had removed your solar panels, if you had just given in, she would have kept escalating. She needed to be stopped, and you were the one who stood up to her. I just did not want to waste $15,000. Maybe, but it became more than that. You became a symbol of resistance to her tyranny, and when the crisis came, you were the one who helped people. That matters." I drove home thinking about symbols and choices. I had never wanted to be a symbol of anything. I just wanted to live in my house, honor my late wife's memory, and try to make a positive impact on the world. The fight with Patricia had been thrust upon me, and I had responded the only way I knew how, by standing up for what was right. As summer settled over Scottsdale and temperatures climbed back into the triple digits, my solar thermal system proved its worth in a different way. The same panels that collected heat in winter helped cool my house in summer through a process called nocturnal radiative cooling. At night, when the desert air was relatively cool, the system radiated heat away from my house into the sky, pre-cooling water that would circulate through my floors during the day. Combined with good insulation and strategic window shading, my house stayed comfortable even during the hottest days of July and August. My neighbors with their own solar thermal systems reported similar results. Utility bills were way down across the community, and people were finally feeling like the investment in sustainable technology was paying off in tangible ways. In September, on the one-year anniversary of receiving Patricia's first violation notice about my solar panels, I hosted a barbecue at my house. 30 people showed up, including everyone who had helped with the campaign to remove the old HOA board, and everyone who had installed solar thermal systems based on my recommendations. Frank made a toast. To Tom Keller, who taught us all that sometimes the right thing to do is also the stubborn thing to do. And to Meadowbrook Hills, which survived its darkest moment and came out stronger on the other side. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun or my heating system. This was the warmth of community, of shared experience, of people who had been through something difficult together and had come out the other side as friends. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up the remnants of the party, I stood on my back patio and looked out at the neighborhood. Lights glowed in windows throughout Meadowbrook Hills, and I could see the subtle dark rectangles of solar panels on several roofs. The community had changed in fundamental ways over the past year. And while the catalyst had been Patricia's criminality and the heating system failure, the real transformation had been in how people thought about their homes and their relationship with authority. People were no longer afraid to ask questions, to demand transparency, to stand up for their rights. The HOA board was no longer a distant authority that made arbitrary decisions, but rather a group of neighbors trying to serve the community. And the focus had shifted from maintaining appearances to maintaining actual infrastructure and supporting choices that benefited both individual homeowners and the community as a whole. I thought about Patricia, now finishing her second year in prison. I wondered if she understood what she had lost, not just in terms of freedom and reputation, but in terms of the opportunity to actually lead a community toward something good. She could have been remembered as the president who encouraged sustainable living, who maintained critical infrastructure, who empowered homeowners to make smart choices. Instead, she would be remembered as a criminal who stole from her neighbors and let their homes freeze in the winter. The choices we make define us, and Patricia had made very bad choices. But in a strange way, her bad choices had forced the rest of us to make good ones. We had banded together, held her accountable, and rebuilt something better from the ruins of her tenure. As I locked up my house and headed to bed, I passed the plaque on my wall one more time. In recognition of his dedication to sustainable living and his service to the Meadowbrook Hills community during the heating crisis of 2025. It was a nice plaque, but the real reward was not on my wall. It was in the relationships I had built, the knowledge I had gained, and the satisfaction of knowing that when the moment came to either back down or stand firm, I had chosen to stand firm. And that choice had made all the difference. I slept well that night, secure in my warm, comfortable home, knowing that the system I had fought so hard to protect was still humming quietly along, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Outside, the desert night was cool and clear, full of stars and possibility. Inside, I was home,